Welcome to another episode of I Can Do That. I'm David Lyle, your host this time. We are working on a kitchen island that incorporates some seating and some shelving. It's going to be made out of plywood in the whole base structure, and then the top is this pre-manufactured butcher block top. And so it's 4 feet long and 2 feet wide. It's a perfect size for a smaller house or a smaller kitchen where you don't have room for a giant island. And so this is going to be a fun build, so stick around. The plywood that we're using for the 2 legs and the bottom shelf is all laminated together. This stock was ripped down to 24 inches wide at Home Depot, the home center, wherever you may buy your plywood. And so now we're going to get started with laminating these together. A couple considerations you want to have. These pieces have a slight bow in them. And so we're going to face the bow towards the middle so that we can pull these edges together and it'll sort of self-correct here. Also, while we're applying our glue over this entire surface, we're going to use a very fancy spreader, a piece of hardboard, to swipe the glue around. And finally, we have cawls. So once these two are together, we'll send clamps all the way around it, but we'll need cawls on the top and bottom to bring the center firmly together. And so we'll clamp these as well during the last part of the clamping process. Now that I'm ready to apply the glue, I just want to say one last thing. I cut these oversized. I cut these to 35.5 long. You'll see in your plans that's a little oversized. My thought behind that is that once I glue these and put the glue in the middle, there's potential that they could slide a little bit. So I want to do my final cut once these are glued up. And I also, last thing, and then we're going to start spreading some glue. I want to thank Titebond for sponsoring I Can Do That. They've been a good sponsor. They have products across a wide range of wood glues and instant glues and all kinds of situations. And so thank you, Titebond, for that. Now let's get gluing. All right, and so this is what we were talking about. When you pull that glue on, it's going to slide a lot. So I like to lock down a couple corners, make sure I'm square. And I'm going to put the lower part of the clamp here so that it can sit on the table. And once you lock down a couple corners, you're safe. If you're watching this part of I Can Do That, you could leave a comment about some of your biggest glue ups. Have you glued up any massive panels? Is that going to fit? Ideally, your cawls would have a slight bow in the middle so that they really pull the center of your lamination together. I've just taken this out of the clamps, and you'll see that we have some squeeze out along here. My next operation is to square up this side panel, and so to do that, I'm going to use my random orbit sander, and I'm going to take a little bit of material and all of this glue off before I run this through the table saw. I don't want to run this glue along the fence because it'll leave it a little bumpy on the other side. So we'll clean this up and then we'll bring the table saw in and get this panel down to final size. With my two legs to their final dimensions and all squared up and double checked, I'm ready to make the mortise for the stretcher. That is a laminated piece, so it's 1.5 inches wide, minus the little difference where plywood is not actually 3/4 thick. This is 23/32 thick on each piece. And so you need to measure your mortise to the actual workpiece. And the reason that we're cutting this now instead of cutting that notch out with a jigsaw before we laminate the two is that this is the most accurate way to get a mortise exactly where you want. Remember, when we were laminating these together, they were sliding a little bit. You would have had a cumulative error that would have just thrown this out. So we're mortising it now. We're going to use a plunge router with a 1/2 inch bit. And we're going to put the fence on this side of the mortise so that we are not making a climb cut. And so with this 1/2 inch bit, we're going to have to make about 3 passes, and we'll take a couple cuts to get the depth that we need. A couple notes on your plunge router. You want to note the side that you are going to be cutting on, and this is unplugged so I can touch the bit, no worries. And to get the measurement, you want the very edge of the blade closest to there, and so you can measure, and that's 1 7/8. And then if I come to this other side, and to make this cut with the way that I'm going to be holding it, it's the distance from here to here. And this is a nice 3.5. Let me get that so you can see. Well, if it were rotated correctly. And so what I've done is I've marked 1 7/8 over and 3.5 down. And so when I'm making this cut, I'm going to ride this fence on the flat. Oop, and this is not actually in place yet. Let me just come up here. And I will trust that this line will give me the stop inside this mortise that I need. And so I will come all the way over until I hit my stop line, and I'll know that I'm in the right spot. So I'm going to get situated. I'm going to set up my guide rail here. This is one of the clampless guides that has a lever lock that conveniently, so you don't have to use a C-clamp or anything like that for your straight edge. And then I'll show you how this is done. So now we'll move our clamp over to the next pass. And now we can give this a test fit to make sure we're on the right track. And I'm just a hair tight. So we want to make a small adjustment to our fence. Just a smidge. It's hard to fix. Yeah, that looks like okay, I can live with that. And now we'll just need to do a little chisel work to square up this corner from where our round bit stopped. And then we'll be set to go. And we're going to do this on the next one too. With the seating side of our island complete, our joints fit pretty good and I'm happy with them. We're ready to move on to this support and shelf. This is joined together with a lap joint. And so it's an edge lap joint, some might call it. But essentially, this divider that is 10 inches wide is going to have a shelf lapped into it this way. And so what we've decided to do is to make a 5-inch cut this way, that is the width of this plywood, and likewise on the shelf, also 5 inches lapped into there. Now, to do this, we're going to have 2 different ways of doing it because this board is wider than it is long. And so I want to do this one on the table saw, but I'm also going to show you how to do this on the jigsaw where it's a little safer. So I'm going to take this over to the table saw and show you how I'm marking this out. So there's a couple things that we need to think about here. I'm essentially going to be cutting on both sides of this mark this way to waste away this material. The blade is curved, as you might be aware, and so if I were to cut all the way to this line, the bottom side would actually be a little further because of the arc of the blade. And so to think about this, let's bring our fence over. We're going to use a combination square, and we are going to find the place where the blade, oh, a little too far there, is at its maximum distance from the table. And you can see right here is about it. So this will be one stop. And on our board, if we use that as the reference point for where that line to this line, on the top side, that blade will only go about that far. And so I've continued this 5-inch mark onto this edge. And so now I can watch as I push, push, push to that line. We'll be in good shape because we know that is the terminal depth. And so actually here you can see that that little bit of carbide is actually only going to cut to there on this side. And we'll just finish that with a chisel and we'll be in good shape. So let's get ready to make this cut. We are unplugged, and now just dial in the next cut. Put it back in. So you can see where the saw stopped, and if you were to look at the back side, and I don't have the marking lines there, they continue to exactly where we need them. And so to finish this, I'm going to use a little pull saw just to bring that to the line, and then I'll just chisel out this waste. And so when you're sawing this, you'll notice that the kerf of a table saw is far greater than this. So stick to the outside edge there, and then just continue it down. Okay. Okay. Do on the other side. There it is. All right, now let's just clean that up. Okay, so I just completed these 2 cuts on the jigsaw. One thing that I do want to say about the jigsaw, if you have an oscillating function, 1 through 3 or 0 through 3, you want to turn it off for this kind of straight line, follow the line kind of cut, because that will actually bring the blade out a little bit and not be as accurate. It might be a little slower, but it's the way to go. So now I just need to chisel this out and we'll be ready to move on to pocket holes. I have the lap joints completed, and I just want to show you how these fit together now that they're all chiseled out. And may I say, fitting pretty good. I'm happy with that fit. And so this assembly with the shelves at the top, the single shelf there, and the double shelf at the bottom, this whole assembly is going to fit to the side of our cabinet. And so that is going to attach to this side, or that side, I haven't decided yet, with some pocket holes. So not only will this end and this end be screwed into this center portion, we will also have pocket holes on the bottom of the shelves. So here, and on the other side, and here, and then on the other side, to give these shelves a little strength that way, to keep them from racking or sagging or anything like that. So with this lap joint supporting this shelf and then the pocket holes, I think we're gonna be good. So I need to drill some pocket holes now. I've set up my kreg jig for 3/4 inch plywood. So that's an adjustment on this model here, and then also on the collet on the actual drill. And I'm just gonna mark out on my shelves that are 3/4 inch thick, in 2.5 inches from there, from here, and I've already marked this side. This is my top shelf. It doesn't have the lap joint. So I'm just going to mirror those onto here. These are pocket holes, and so these actual positions do not have to be perfect because you're not meeting something on the reference side. So I'll put that aside, and we are going to run these into the jig. So I will line these up. So I have my pockets all drilled on this one. Now I'm going to do the next shelf. I have all of my shelves and the divider ready to go. The pocket holes are done. So I have this lap joint here in the middle to keep things from falling over. And I have this shelf sitting here temporarily. And so I'm going to work my way from this top shelf down, doing my pocket holes and making sure everything is square, because this shelf really needs to be very flush with this leg of the island. So one other thing to mention. We have chosen to make an offset here on each of the shelves because offsets are kind of your friend when you're laying things out and when you're actually building something, because they allow for a little bit of play in where they're located. And so if one piece, one shelf is a 30-second smaller, it won't show. So that's your tip for the day. And so let's get these pocket holes in. Okay, let's pop this up. And we are looking pretty fly. We just need to make our kick down here, which is 3 inches. And we have our shelves that are going to attach to the island. We're almost done. With the shelves done and almost ready to be final assembled, we need to make the kick, the base that that whole cabinet sits on. And so I have a little trick. These are mitered corners at 45. And so I've laid tape on the back side, and I'm going to apply glue in here and then fold it together and send a couple finish nails into this back piece. But I want to take just a moment to thank our sponsor, Woodcraft, for being our go-to for accessories. We get our Type Bond there, we get our tape there, we get our fasteners there. They have it all, and so I just want to say thank you to them, and be sure to check out your local Woodcraft for all of your woodworking needs. So let's throw some glue in here. Oop, keep that nice and flat. And see how we look. Oop. You know, the finger works as a great cleanable brush for glue. Legend has it that our former host of I Can Do That, Chad Stanton, would just give the underside of the table a good wipe. So in honor of you, Chad, there you go. All right, let's fold this around. And our miters are looking very good. Nice and tight all the way down. And then we just have this back piece here. that we're going to just nail together. Oh, don't forget to close your glue. And let's see if we can just make sure we stay square. Okay, make sure these are nice and sunk. Cool. We are going to let these dry, and then we're going to attach it to the cabinet, and we'll be one step closer to being done. Our kitchen island is going to be painted, and so as to not have plywood edges that are going to show through the paint and have voids and that kind of thing, we are going to use veneer tape, edge banding. This has adhesive already on the back that is activated by the heat from this iron that looks like it came from my mom's house. But I've already pre-cut this piece so that it's about the right length, and all I need to do is iron it on, like your high school band shirts that you used to have. So let's give this a go. Sure we are nice and level. I don't want you to overthink this. So now I am trimming the excess off before I file a nice crisp line on this side. I just finished ironing the next piece on. I just want to give you a little tip on using the file to trim this. On the other side, I started with the knife, and with this wide veneer, I just didn't like how that was working. So with the file, we can break it along the end here. And as you file through, you're going to feel it go through the veneer, and then you'll hit the adhesive back and finally come all the way through. And so that'll be finally cut. Then you're going to lead with the file, and you're always pulling down with the handle up top with this corner so that it kind of cuts into the veneer tape, and it'll start to almost kind of curl off. And you can kind of just really continue it with that leading edge, and it'll come off in a nice clean line. And occasionally it'll break like that, and that's okay. But we have a nice line, and you can control the amount of chamfer. I'm going pretty straight, so I'm going to continue down the rest of here and get this piece cleaned up. The base, or the kick, is dry, and so now we can put this on. And Jake, are you getting this? Look at this miter. It is looking very nice. So you can take the tape off at that point. And I've gone ahead and I've pocket holed all the way around just to give this a lot of stability. And so I'm going to put the top up this way. And in the plans, you'll see that it's a 2-inch reveal all the way around. So you can get that all the way. And we're looking good. And so the shelves are on their back, and that way I can just go ahead and get this pocket hole. I'll wrap that up, and now I think we're going to get ready to assemble this thing. We got the kick on, and this is basically the form. So I want to show you how I'm going to attach this stretcher to this piece here with a countersunk screw and a plug. So I'm going to bring this up here, and just be careful when you're drilling these holes over here. Don't drill it into your island. And I've done one of them so far. And we have some walnut plugs here, because we're fancy, that are going to sit in this hole like that. And all I'm using to do this is my countersunk bit. So I've marked my holes already, and this is my 5-inch mortise that's on the other side. And I've just marked up a little bit, and so I'm just going to drill straight down. And we're only working with 3/4 of an inch of material here, so you don't want to go too far, but the countersink on this will give you a hole nice enough for this plug. So we'll get this one done, and then we'll assemble. You want to check your progress as you go. You really don't want to go too far. It's looking like that will do. And so the glue will fill in any kind of small gap there. And then once it's glued in, we'll flush cut that, and it'll be like it never happened. And then it'll be ready for paint. So, all right, I'm going to get this installed. I've got this back on the ground, and I'm ready to put the screws in. We are going to leave this joint without glue so that it can be disassembled for travel and it can fit in Jake's Honda Element. This side is going to get glue and screws, and so I'm going to drive this in. And all I did was do an angled pilot hole, and I chamfered the top a little bit. And so we're tight. And now, if I can do this on my own, tight fit. Okay. So I am going to apply glue to the inside of this mortise. And try not to get too much in there, but I do want a healthy amount. Does anybody else like taking the dry glue off these caps? Okay. Get it on the wall there. I'm going to do some on the inside. Make sure we spread it a little bit. Again, use that all-natural glue brush. And we're going to call that good. Let's get this on here. Okay, we are seated. And so I have just 2 screws that are going to go in these holes that we countersunk. And then we are going to throw in those walnut plugs. Were I to be staining this, I'd be a little more careful with getting glue everywhere, because that'd just be a little more cleanup to prep for the clear coat. All right, so now all I have to do is get the top on here, and we're going to do a couple figure 8s and attach the top that way. We're attaching the top with these figure 8 washers, and so they're figure 8s because they look like 8s. And so I've already done one of them, and the way that I do this is with a Forstner bit, and then just chisel out a little bit from the corners. And now this fastener will allow the top to expand and contract. Not a huge deal in this kind of laminated top, but they're convenient, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So on your Forstner bit, you have a little point that you want to keep from the edge just a hair, but the bit should not wander off the board, and it should give you a nice kind of half circle on your work. So let's give this a go. I'm going to align that to there. And you only need enough to get that washer flush. So once you're done with that, you can come in with a chisel. And I oversized this enough that I don't really need to do that, but you could come in and clean up these rounds a little bit to give this figure 8 room to move. And so I used the 7/8 Forstner on this, and so I think this is great. And so I'm going to just screw this in. Oh no, with my Phillips that's over here. Just be very gentle when you're using a drill on little screws like this. There we go. Okay, and now we'll have those ready for attaching the top. And I'm going to move over here where I've already started to drill 2 holes that will come up through this shelf. And I've pretty much put it in line almost with this last screw, so we're not too far overhanging. And I've gone in just with the drill portion of my chamfer bit. Now I'm going to go underneath and chamfer that hole so we get a nice flush screw there, and Jake doesn't have to see the head of a screw. All right, so that's ready. And we can throw this top on. All right, and this is Jake's kitchen island. One more thing that I want to show you. We have black iron pipe to use as a footrest for the stools that are going to go here. So this will get mounted in here once we're in Jake's once we're in Jake's house. And this is just a 2-foot section, and that will get mounted down there with 4 screws on each side. So we are done. Jake's gonna paint this when he gets to his house, but I wanna thank you for joining us in this episode of I Can Do That. I'm your host this time, David Lyle, and we'll see you next time.